All right. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 4:02 on Thursday, October 19th. We'll do a roll call. Terry Lynch,
Here.
Brian Sylvia,
Here.
Lucas Murray,
Here.
Chip McGare,
Here.
Dave Palizzetti. Here. I forgot your last name, Jim? Jim Rogers. We have left field, Jim Rogers, Chris Spiegel, and Phil Conti from Studio Jade. Brian Mahoney is here. He's just stepped out for a moment. Bob Littlefield, Superintendent Littlefield, cannot make it due to a funeral situation, and Town Manager Manny, I believe, is out of the country. All right. As I emailed y'all, I'm sorting out a snafu that occurred with some previously posted meeting minutes, and so I'm just navigating that. And once I get all of that taken care of, we'll come forward with meeting minutes again for approval. And so we'll move on to item number 3, review, discussion, and action regarding public correspondence. I personally have not seen I take that back. Doral did email myself and Luke Murray asking if Left Field and Studio Jade would be in attendance on Tuesday, and I responded yes to him. And I think you responded to him as well. And I believe it was brought to my attention that we received some public correspondence from a Maggie Martin. Brian, I know you saw it. I haven't yet.
Yep. So Mrs. Martin sent us an email regarding some deferred maintenance. She'd also emailed me in my role as director. Before this meeting, I did send her a follow-up that I would follow up with some of the information she requested from the school department. And
it was related to the high school, deferred maintenance on the high school, or just in general?
on the high school.
On the high school, okay.
Just so you know, she left me a message today. I haven't had a time to respond. She said she reached out to you, so you're handling it. So
Yeah, we've
I'd
gone
rather
back and forth a
just-
few times with phone tag and a couple emails. So
I'd rather you, because my answer, a lot of it's school related.
Yeah.
So really we don't have that information. So I'm just going to redirect to you.
which is perfect. Yep. And like I said, I kind of went over that with my email response to her today. Is that after this meeting and tomorrow, I'd review what she was looking for and try to get her what she's looking for tomorrow.
All right, sounds good.
All right. All right, and so that brings us to business item number 4, discussion Left Field Studio Jade to show next schematic iteration of South Kingston High School plans. You need a mic.
Hello. Hello. Okay. Yep. So at this committee's direction, as well as at the town council's direction, Phil Conti went back to his design and to see how we could combine all of the get all of the educational programming spaces that are required as part of your visioning sessions into a plan and what that square footage would look like. Phil, if you want to go ahead and walk everybody through the next iteration of the design.
Sure. I have a number of copies that we could lay out on the table, but in general, I'll start with the highlights. A couple things in addition to tightening up all of the spaces, keeping them functional but below the suggested ride guidelines, we were able to reduce the building to about 143,000 square feet. That also included the removal of the walking track around the gymnasium that was on the second level. We reduced the auditorium seating to 725 and the gymnasium bleacher seating to 725. We also recognized some efficiencies in trying to reduce the student commons area, but still making sure we can fit the furniture for 3 lunches, for example. Programmatically, we made sure we maintained the number of classrooms that we discussed several months ago, the number of rooms and labs associated with science, CTE programs, et cetera. So all of that has remained. Everything has shrunk a little bit. And as I mentioned, we did right-size the auditorium and the gymnasium to 725 occupants. So in general, the building's still the same. All the major public spaces, the larger CTE spaces, the auditorium, the gymnasium, locker rooms, student commons, cafeteria, kitchen, admin, all remain on the first floor with the beginning of what we'll call the academic tower, which is 3 levels up. I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have. We were over 150,000 square feet in the Stage 2 application. There probably are some more efficiencies to be recognized, but in Stage 3, where there is even more follow-up and discussion with the administration, or, for example, maybe your kitchen vendor, I could easily see this building right now at 143, going to 145 or more. I think we'll just have to have a mindset that if you add, you will need to subtract. I don't think this building is going to be able to get too much bigger within the budget, even running it up to 150 million.
Goal, so we wouldn't impact the field, was to get down to somewhere closer to 140,000 square feet. At 143,000, that might flex to 145, 146,000. That might, if we're to retain the 150, might mean taking a little bit of scope out of the field. So that's still our buffer to maintain that number.
So the budget that we prepared for you today reflects those new numbers. It currently does have CCMS Field at the full 11.5 million, which was originally proposed. We have not removed any money out of that scope of work yet. I think this committee has already talked about possibly some efficiencies that they might be able to find in the field spaces. But where we currently stand right now at 153,820,000 at 143,000 square foot building, we feel is well within striking distance considering the contingencies that we have on this project, the cost we're carrying per square foot, as well as sort of the flex that we have in CCMS Field as well. Any questions on the budget? Can we walk you guys through the budget? Be happy to.
Yep. So first, I just want to thank you both for taking care of that. But I think what you've done with that 143,000 square foot building was meet our needs. After reviewing that with the both of you last week, I feel like we didn't sacrifice anything. So the project that we were looking for would still be the project that we would get. We had also had a discussion about the importance of those parameters, and you started to get at it, is we can't let the size of the building grow. It's got to be, these are the parameters, and we're used to working in education. It's like, this is what we have. So if you'd rather have this, then we're gonna have to trade something else to get there. But I think what we've got here for this 3-level building is where we need to be, with changes coming over the course of as we prepare. And if we get to the Stage 3, hopefully we do, then we're going to have more of those conversations. But I think it's really done a great job, and I appreciate that. But I think that's where we need to be. Is this is what we can get for the money, and it's 143,000 square feet, and we need to stay within that parameter. And if you want this, then you can't. Then something else has to go, or something else has to change. But I didn't feel, looking at that we sacrificed really anything that we hadn't wanted already. So it was a really great job, guys, on that one.
And I think it's also important, thank you, Chip, I think it's also important to note that we have carried in our numbers a construction contingency of 2.5%. We have carried escalation at 9.5%, and we carried an owner's contingency that works out to approximately $10 million as well.
And so we had, at the last meeting that I was at, you had said that you felt comfortable that these numbers were good until September of next year. Is that still something that you feel comfortable with?
So yes, we do feel comfortable that as long as we can grab a CM on board, we get a positive vote spring, and we start with our early release packages, site work, things like that, things that we can get out early. These numbers will work for that, yes.
On the escalation, the 9.5%, is that total to the midpoint of construction?
Yes, it is.
So 2 things. One just summary, so I'm understanding, right? All in, we're at about 154 million, round number, right? So to get to that 150, we still have about 4 million, which we can deal with in stage 3, is what you're telling us. So you're saying within striking distance, but we're at the minimum program, what we're hearing, right, Chip? That's sort of the minimum program what we need to accommodate the need at this point, right?
No, I don't think I would say that we're at the minimum. I think what I'm saying, and maybe I didn't state it very well, is that we're where we want to be.
Okay.
With it. So when I look at at what we've got here, I feel like we're right where we want to be. We're not sacrificing anything there.
Right.
But I think the key here is we have to set parameters that we're staying to this square footage so that we don't we don't. Yeah. Right. So we're very happy with what we're seeing there. It doesn't mean that like this bathroom couldn't be over here, or whatever, but I think what we need. And what we've asked for is all right there.
So yeah, at this point, Phil and Chip, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but this does not make any compromises to what you guys need in order to provide everything that you want inside the school.
Yes, that's correct. That's a much better stated thing. It's been a long couple days, so.
I also want
Fumbling
to.
for
I also
the words
want
a
to.
little.
I also want to clear the word "want." It's need, right? It's about our having a great educational program, and it's not like, oh, this is what we want. It is what we need in order to provide that. So it's balancing out the wants and needs, and I think they've done a wonderful job doing it and working with Chip and his team. So
I agree with that. Again, I'm not doing the best job of being eloquent tonight. It's been a long couple of days.
That's all right.
But so I appreciate the clarification. But yes, that is exactly. That is exactly right. I agree with what Kate said, and I agree with the way that Chris said it as well.
I just want to be, so thank you for the clarification. So what I'm hearing is, we're not at minimum. Minimum would be sacrificing, right? Minimum would be, I think we're in a good sweet spot of having already made sacrifices for what we really maybe wanted, which was like the 1,000-seat auditorium and the probably eliminated some of what we'd call a little bit bells and whistles. We're down to a really comfortable program that fits the needs, right? So, but we still have some money that we have to value engineering. We can do that later, right? Is what I'm hearing. As a building committee, we can work on that. And you think we can? It's a couple % that we can shave out of the budget.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the next thing's a question, and this kind of goes to Phil on stage 2. So we had a square footage of about 150,000 square feet that we put in. It's a formula-driven number from RIDE. We've now reduced the building prospectively. Does the formula change? Does our reimbursement change because of that? Because as we calc numbers, I think my concern is that that shifts the financial equation. So do you think that we'd be approved at that 150 formula, or maybe that's a question for RIDE?
When we were delivered the supplemental questions, that was our formula, the formula and the resulting square footage and cost was not in question. I would probably feel more comfortable this discussion happening with RIDE to see. But I don't anticipate, I'd like to run through the numbers real quick just to see what that formula looks like now.
Okay, fair enough.
But, sorry.
Go ahead.
So just from experience, communities are having to shrink their buildings all the time, right? Because of the construction costs and the constraints on the industry right now, the pressures, I should say, on the industry right now. When you go to RIDE and you show a smaller building, they don't reduce your funding because you have a smaller building.
Okay.
What they funded you at, if you have to make sacrifices and your building has to be smaller, they don't take that into account in their funding formula. They say, we approved you, you're good. And if you had to value engineer your building and it's now smaller square foot, the cost doesn't change. So that's not really how they see it.
Typically, this process happens later, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess my fear is, we're a victim of doing what I think is the right thing, acting early to start looking at the numbers and value engineering before we go to bond. I just hate for that to be considered and actually be penalized because of that, because not having to modify our stage 2 to reflect that. And ask the question, you might get the answers. So maybe
the fact that they did not question the enrollment all of the formula begins with the enrollment.
Yeah.
And we targeted 725 and substantiated that number, which is higher than what it is. The formula is based on that.
Okay.
That was never brought into question.
All right, so the formula based on, because I think it's what, 200 square foot is per student and 225 for the CTE. So they're backing it on a per pupil basis. So based on that is where you came up with that 150 number that's in there?
That's
or
the
Shelley?
maximum that they would reimburse up to.
But we put in for that number.
Yes.
And our application, as Phil said, we had several supplemental questions, but they never questioned our funding, they never questioned our enrollment or things like that, any of the formula-based things. The only thing that they're waiting for is, you know, what comes out of Tuesday's meeting to see if this project's going to be put to the voters. That's what they're waiting for.
Okay, thank you.
The only thing I would just clarify on that, Luke, is that I don't think, based on what I've been reading, I don't think this is value engineering, because I feel like that what I'm hearing that as a negative connotation, like that you're giving things up that you need. I don't feel like we've done any of that. I feel like I agree with you, we're doing the right thing here, and that by doing the right thing now, we don't have to do that value engineering thing. I think we right-sized it for our needs, and without giving anything we needed up.
And during the Stage 3 process, which will be much more, you know, we'll get way past schematic design, obviously, but we just need to make clear from the very beginning that additional adds to this project will come at a cost of programming that we already have. So there will be discussions and visioning sessions where we sit down with stakeholders and we say, what do the students need more? Is it this or this? Because you want to make sure that you have those things. And your ride will do their review too. And your ride will say, cut this storage and cut this and cut that. So we need to be very well prepared for those meetings.
And I think from my perspective, I think we have wiggle room in the field and the stadium and around it. We have a one or two, like, we have no wiggle room as far as, like, we want the 8-lane. It's not, again, not a want, it's a need. And as far as, like, the size of the field, because we've been surviving with a subpar size of our field for games. And then on the flip side of it, when it comes to the gymnasium space, the auditorium space, and the athletic field, at some point they're going to be sources of revenue because the community will utilize them, and then we will be able to receive funds for that. So I just, it's a great I'll say a new starting point, because like you said, we will be refining over time. So does anybody have any other statements, questions, comments, concerns?
I just wanted to jump on what you were saying. It's a source of revenue because currently our auditorium generates no revenue. That as a courtesy to the community, it is a we do not generate money from it. So I just wanted to jump on that, and that is a potential to do that type of thing.
Yep.
New facility.
One other thing, and there's not an agenda item for this, so I'm going to weave it into this gingerly, right? Because we're talking about the design, is something to keep in mind that I was contacted by Paul Jordan at Rhode Island DEM. I've had discussion with Chris on this. The land disposition or the swap would have to come through the town on an application process. It's something kind of unique, and so I just want to, in the context of design, make sure that we're not changing the plan significantly because we need that open space, right? And it's a non-typical situation for them. Typically, you're going and buying a separate parcel of land somewhere. You're saying we want to swap that. In this case, the town already owns the property that we're swapping for. There's really nothing in the land use or the regulations, 6F regulations about that. Paul doesn't see it as a hurdle. Luckily enough, the Land and Water Conservation Coordinator lives in our community. Paul Jordan's on our planning board, so that's a great benefit to us, and I'm sure he'll assist. But I'm going to be putting in a soft application to the National Park Service just to have it reviewed so we can continue on. So in the vein of design, let's just keep that in mind.
And we had let you know, so Massachusetts, the MSBA requires, prior to any project getting moving forward, a land use feasibility study. So I know that if the town needs any support with the feasibility study, Left Field is very well prepared to help you out with that.
Thank you.
The other thing I did want to say to Luke's point, other thing I wanted to put to Luke's point is that South Kingstown is not the only community that's having these Central Falls, North Kingstown. So it's on their radar, right? So it's not just one community. It's multiple communities that are going through the same thing. So, strength in numbers, power in numbers type thing. But I think, to your point, having a decision maker, who lives in town, understands it very well is very important.
All right, so that brings us to item number 5, discussion status on architect and engineering RFQ process.
So this is me again. We thought we would have a more conversational approach to this topic today rather than a presentation. We've been reviewing the schedule for this project, how we can make sure that we stay within our escalation. And we believe at this point, I'm just going to say what we're recommending, and then I think we can work backwards. We're recommending this project to go traditional, design, and then construction manager at risk at this point. There's different advantages and disadvantages with design build and the multiple types, or Rhode Island design build, as we call it here. We think that we have plenty of time to bring on an architect and then bring on that CM also quickly, right around before the bond vote, so that if the bond vote is successful, that next day contracts could be signed. We would like to do it this way because it gives us a lot of freedom with early procurements to get ahead of long lead items. It gives us a lot of flexibility with releasing packages early as well. It also lets us get real numbers in very, very quickly from the subcontractors who are actually performing the work. It is a project delivery model that we are very familiar with. That's very common in Rhode Island. I know there's plenty of members on this committee that are familiar with the construction manager at risk project method. We also think this allows you guys to really choose who you want. You guys can choose the best architect for this job and the best construction manager for this job. There's different models of design build, but sometimes it makes more sense to go out and choose a team, right? A construction manager and an architect will team up. There's also, you can assign an architect to a construction manager. There's some caveats for that, right? You're kind of forcing a marriage between two companies that maybe don't necessarily work that well together. We have been successful. We are currently under construction on both a CMAR and a design build in Rhode Island, so we're very familiar with both. Having weighed all of our options and discussing it as a group, we would recommend a construction manager at-risk delivery method and a traditional architect procurement. Having said that, I have already prepared an RFP for architectural services that has been reviewed by Luke and procurement. So we would be looking, hopefully, to release that once we get a final decision from town council on the bond number. And when we're going out to vote, we would look to release that RFP very soon on the heels of that. We want to get an architect on board right away to start working internally through some of these problems in their head, or not problems, I should say, but making sure that efficiency is at top of the mind. And it gives us a lot more time also to have a robust interview process, to have a robust selection process. Selection is different for every single group, and we can have that conversation about how you guys want to move through that process. But I did just want to say that is our recommendation at this time, is to go traditional CMAR with the designer brought on first, and that the town would then hold 2 separate contracts, one for the construction manager as well as one for the architect.
So I want to clarify for some folks in the community, because the question that I keep seeing pop up is what's happening with have we gone out to bid for this, and what's happening with the search? And the answer is we can't do that until we have a definitive decision from the town as far as the dollar figure for the bond.
Absolutely, yeah. We need to, it has a big deal about which architecture firm that you all are going to be ultimately selecting, or the town is going to be ultimately selecting for the work. We want to make sure that expectations are set from the beginning and they don't maneuver as the project moves forward. That doesn't mean that there's not a lot of interest. There's a ton of companies that would love to do a high school in South Kingstown. It's a great project. At $150 million, has a great budget, and we think that you're going to get a lot of interest.
So I'm agreeing with your CM at risk approach. The problem we're seeing right now is those lead times of items, transformers taking a year, generators taking 2 years. So the earlier we can get some of those procurements started and not held up by somebody signing a contract and another change order and this and that and the other thing, the better it is, because it's where you start running into your escalation on everything else. So the earlier we can get those bids in, the better it is. And I'm less of a fan of design build, so I mean that would also solve some of that problem. But I agree that I think see them at risk after having a separate designer. And please don't ever force an architect and an engineer to work together in the same room.
Yeah.
Without them partnering on their own, I would never want to see that approach. So for what it's worth, I would support that approach.
And we've been very successful with another client in Rhode Island. We've got our own MEP staff in-house, so getting those early packages out. In this case, it was for a switchgear system that we released very, very early. We released it before I think RIDE had even fully approved the project at stage 3. But it's like you said, it's important to get those out right away, get yourself in thing. But having our own MEP staff gives you that additional level of confidence that what you're ordering is the right product for what you need on the
Right. We're seeing like 20 weeks on granite curbing. It's kind of crazy. So, yeah, anything we can do to get those things out, because it is we're trying to turn these 2 sites over as fast as we can, and this, we're trying to get this done in basically 2 academic years, and meet the RIDE deadline. So, yeah, we gotta get going.
With that, as fast as we can, are we still targeting a February vote?
March, right?
That's a good question. So I looked into it. We had a discussion this week. February is just not tenable. It pushes us back in early December to start getting things squared away with the Secretary of State. Literally, like we're working the day after Christmas and trying to get things with the Board of Canvassers. I can provide you with the schedule, and I meant to bring it tonight, but I'll shoot that out to you, Kate, and we can distribute it. But we did work backwards, and it's just too many steps to be taken, and I know many of you probably aren't aware of some of those steps, but the clerk is, and it would put a big restriction on them. So I think the most reasonable is early April. We've already kind of mapped that out based on the timelines. That also gives us a chance to potentially have that legislation in place and have it as a surety to the public that is passed and ready to go, and would put us in a good position. So also, something we probably don't think about is winter. February is ripe for snowstorms and inclement weather, and it may not, but that it does play a role in sometimes the voting. So we're recommending that we go early April.
So great. We'll plan on when we develop the RFP. We'll have another discussion with you guys to make sure that everybody knows, the CM and the architect know that April 12th or something like that. April 13th would be the day that we would sign the contract.
More importantly, I want to see what that does to how design kicks off, when early packages hit, when construction starts. Then are we now starting in the winter instead of, all of that? So I do want to figure out how that impacts the overall start and stop of construction, to understand if there's any impacts that might have. So that doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? It affects other things. So we'll figure out what those impacts are.
Luke, I don't know if you know as town manager, but are we doing a PLA? And if we are, we probably need to start that study before they put the RFP out.
So we would recommend.
Can we say what a PLA is for the
So
committee?
sure.
Labor agreement.
Yeah. So we would recommend hiring counsel to do a project labor agreement study. We can recommend a few, and of course, legal counsel have somehow worked themselves out from having to be on an MPA and things like that. I'm not sure exactly how they did it, but so we can recommend a few that we've worked with. The important thing is that we sit down with them. We talk about the trends that we're seeing in the construction industry. We talk about the site, how the site operates, what subs are available for our type of work, how busy are subcontractors. In Rhode Island, there's going to be a lot of work going on in Rhode Island, and they'll be able to make a decision and pass that on for town council approval. We really suggest involving legal counsel in the project labor agreement study. They're relatively short money, about $10,000, and it gives the committees a lot of protection.
Yeah, so in answer to your question, Dave, we haven't talked about it because we're not that far. That's like step 20, right? But we'd follow the lead of the OPM on that and what guidance he'd provide on the PLA. And if we need to get outside counsel, to your point, they are exempted under state law under public procurement for municipalities, so we can literally pick one. That's why we can pick a solicitor. And we'd have our solicitor involved as well, just at a high level. So when we get there, we'll cross that bridge.
I'd submit that you're almost there.
Okay.
Because we're already in October. It takes a couple months to do the study and get everything before they can do the RFP, because the CM coming on board is going to want to know whether or not it's a PLA. They can't price it without it. So all the different contracts are going to be, kind of should start now. Good.
All right.
That was my next.
So that's something we'd need to know if, there's, because that also has an impact. We got to pay for that, right? We got to pay for outside counsel, and right now we don't have actual project money. So if we have to front something, we should talk.
If this committee would like, I can solicit proposals from two law firms that I've worked with on project labor agreements. They both have a ton of experience in Rhode Island, and I would provide those, I would assume, to the school building committee for review, and then you guys would kick it over to town. Whatever the process is, I'll be able, if you give me a couple weeks, I'll have two proposals for you.
Yeah, and I'll alert Mike Ursillo, our solicitor, of what we're trying to do. So if he has input into the process as well, I'll let you know.
But generally, in the CM RFPs that I've developed, we do add language that this project may go project labor agreement, this project may not, to give us a little bit. But I agree with Dave. If we were to know before the RFP would go out, that would be a benefit. We probably, depending on which way it goes, you could see lower general requirements and things like that. Probably not, because most of the CMs that are capable of doing this work are all union contractors, but not all of the subcontractors that would be working on them are. And all of them are signatories to the laborers, which really affects your general requirements as well.
I was just thinking, for the people at home, could you just give an overview of what a PLA does, pros?
Oh, sure. So, yeah, a project labor agreement is an agreement with building trades that you, for certain portions of the work, you will hire union firms as opposed to open shop firms. There's pluses and minuses to PLAs. I don't think this is probably the right setting for me to get into too many of those positives. Yeah.
The benefit is that they generally, as part of the PLA, they refuse to strike, and they will guarantee that they provide labor.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be about $180 million of projects going on within about 10 miles of this site when this high school is built. So there might be a benefit of having one. The cons are it costs you more.
So yeah, it does limit your subcontractor pool. However, PLAs are not just black and white, right? There's a lot of negotiations that can take part with project labor agreements where you exempt certain trades from the PLA to increase competition. There's a lot of different ways you can structure it. So that, again, is how, for the most recent one, the PLA study I'm doing right now, it took multiple meetings of us sitting down with the construction manager as well as Left Field and ourselves talking about specific scopes of work, where we're seeing, and the CMs will have the most up-to-date information about, where they're seeing pressure on specific subs, like MEP subs, for example. Mechanical is usually a big one. We have to remember that the project will be prevailing wage no matter what. However, with that said, when you increase your subcontractor pool, you get more competitive pricing. So, but it's also, when we're talking about we've got $180 million worth of projects going on, it's nice to know that you're at the front of the line in case that you do need to bring in labor, right? That labor is going to be going to your job before it goes somewhere else. So, but are there also 6 other PLAs that say that exact same thing? So we need to, it's a conversation. It's certainly, and this is why I recommend legal counsel getting involved in it. It's an incredibly important discussion for your project.
We'll talk offline on this, I think specifically, and then we'll come together and figure out what we need to do on the town side to get it going.
We obviously, I've done projects that are open shop. I've done projects through PLAs. My most recent large project that we're doing right now is going PLA. So, like you said, there's advantages and disadvantages to each, but legal counsel will take a great look at your project and say, and give you advice on to what the right pathway is. And then once you decide what sort of considerations need to go into that PLA to make sure that you guys are getting the best value out of the project.
Anybody else have any comments or questions on this topic? All right, let's move along. We have about 22 minutes. So we have discussion, left field to discuss construction management procurement process.
Am I still on? Okay. Yeah, we kind of already addressed this, but again, we would be putting out a construction manager at risk procurement. This is a great project. You're gonna generate a lot of interest, not just from Rhode Island firms, but from Connecticut firms and Massachusetts firms. So we're proud to report that our last CM procurement, we received 7 firms bidding on it. That's a lot. 7 firms, to be able to take your choice of 7 construction management firms. Also, when you have 7 firms, they get really tight on those general conditions. And, you know, between the highest bidder and the lowest bidder of those CMs was over $3 million. So when you can increase your competition, I think that says a lot about, you know, people want to work in South Kingstown, but being firm but fair. I think that's sort of what our mantra is going to continue to be for these procurements and these projects, that we see the construction manager as a partner. We're not on separate teams. We're partners together on the project. And when you work that way, you get a lot of people that want to work with you.
We'll move along to preparation for joint town council, school committee, and school building committee meeting, which will be taking place on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, October 24th, here in council chambers, 7 o'clock. We'll confirm the date, the time. We know it's the date is the October 24th. We'll confirm the time.
The agenda just went out.
So on this topic, I'm assuming, as we've stated, left field, Studio Jade will be in attendance. As far as schematic designs and spreadsheets and costs, what kind of presentation can we expect or not expect?
Well, that was why I wanted to have this on the agenda tonight. I wanted to be clear about what your expectations were for deliverables. Obviously, we'll be presenting the budget. Obviously, we'll be presenting the schematic designs, but from my understanding, finances are going to be provided by Brian and his team in terms of what we're looking like in terms of tax impacts and things like that. But I just wanted to make sure that we understood what deliverables you were expecting so I can make sure I have them for you.
So I have the agenda in front of me. I worked on the agenda with the clerk between today and yesterday, with obviously the town managers out this week. What I based it on is what he had already communicated with Bob Littlefield, the superintendent, about what would be discussed, and then also in discussions that we had on Monday about kind of how the meeting flow would go. It will be at 6 o'clock. It is in these chambers. The flow of the meeting really starts, it's really a data gathering meeting. So the idea is that left field would be giving an introduction, telling us kind of what we saw tonight. You know, here's where the budget stands, here's the project, here's the building program. This is what we think gets you what you need, right? We'll move into financial, which Brian will give. He's already run a lot of these numbers. We're still tweaking, but we have amortization schedules for both 20-year and 30-year, which is what the council wanted to see at the $150 million, and the tax impacts that go along with that, and then how it affects a median household income. Then the idea is to move into what the council has requested to talk to the school committee about is some of the school data. So one of the things is, and a question that came up from a meeting I had with the council president and vice president last night is the newest NESDEC data, if the schools happen to have that, because we don't have access to that. On the town side, that is a school thing. So actually, I'll just put that out there. I was going to request to the superintendent, but if you guys have any information on that, I can certainly reach out to the superintendent. But they wanted...
Public, I didn't think that was locked down, but...
NESDEC data? I mean, it's in our stage 2 report. We already have that out there. It's just a matter of...
Yeah, but the NESDEC data you submitted as part of the stage 2 is what RIDE is going to be basing their funding on, not any numbers that have come out since the stage 2 was submitted.
No, I'm aware of that. I think what the council's looking for, it's a request, right? I think the council's just looking for trends. Have things changed this year, or is it still trending the same, right? I don't think they're looking for, anything that would go to RIDE. It was a question, like, do we have any new NASDAQ data? I think, might be a fair question, because we might have that information. If you don't have it, you don't have it. Staffing, FTEs, and operational data.
I think I think the timing is off for the request, but if that's the answer, that's the answer, right? So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Briefing regarding the school budget and any surplus fund balances was on here. Discussion estimated cost savings, nothing new here, is to the closing of Curtis Corner Middle School and Wakefield facilities. Discussion and potential action regarding the proposed school building project and associated bond to finance construction. So we kept this as not labeled as a work session, so they could potentially take action here. Whether they will or not, that's completely, we're going to be throwing a lot of data around, right? We're going to have a lot of discussion. They may choose to table it and synthesize some of this and do it at a later date. They could get to the end of the meeting and make a vote. We wanted to keep it as a normal meeting posting to allow that to happen if they should choose.
One of the things that we didn't put in our financial analysis is the pay-go financing and the bond premium at the bottom. I don't know if that discussion wants to come up in terms of how the bond gets written, and is that within it? Is that a surplus?
So we have had discussions previously with council. I don't think it's something we want to put as a central source. The way we ran the numbers was without the pay-go, correct? And we're looking at it that way. We've explained to council that we feel it's in the best interest now to keep it open language, so we don't have to necessarily pay down the bond, because if we experience additional inflation and we're not sure, we don't want to come back, is the bottom line, right? So we could use some of that, I'm going to call it 9 million, whatever it is, of pay-go. We could maybe use a portion of it to cover some gaps. I think the intent is to not have to use that and do put it on the bond if possible. But, and I think the council's amenable to that. So if it comes up, we'll address it, and Brian can certainly address that. But our intent is to take the restrictive language out of the legislation.
I think the only other topic for this particular agenda item today is in prep for the meeting coming up. There has been chatter about, once again, about the location of the high school, and once again about whether it should be a new build or renovation. And I want it to be clear that we've had these discussions at this table, at the school committee table, at the town council table multiple times. The information is out there, the videos have been recorded, that the decision's been made. This discussion that is happening on October 24th at 6 o'clock in this room is specifically for a new high school, utilizing the land swap scenario that we've explained multiple times, and that RIDE would not approve a project that included renovating the existing building. And also, building this on any other piece of property in our community is not on the table anymore. Those decisions have been made. And so while this question I'm hearing is going to pop up for this meeting on Tuesday, I just want to make it clear that this project, we're at Columbia Street, it's a new build, and I think that's it, like hard stop. So I did want to, just so that people are prepped, that conversation is happening in our community, and it will be brought to this meeting, from my understanding.
So would you like us, Phil and myself, to be prepared to provide a quick synopsis of why a renovation project would not save you money, why it would present a whole list of issues in terms of swing space and trying to get...
It's a process we've navigated
Yeah,
in like blood, sweat, and tears over the past 2 years. So I would hate to relive it, but I would also suggest that maybe we have handy, like, here's the meeting where it was discussed and decided upon, so that and that can be fall on us, just to say this has been vetted multiple times in detail. And this is the result and quite frankly, we've had Mario Carino Karina, at our podium, saying in very specific language, RIDE will not approve a project for South Kingstown if it's a renovation of the high school.
One thing I'd like to also add, if the, I don't believe the new NASDAQ numbers are out, I haven't heard that, but if they are, it might also allow us to take a look at East Providence or some of these other new builds that have been completed recently to see how their matriculation rates have increased and what building a new school does. You know, I've said it before, I'll say it again, you guys spend almost $4 million to send kids out of district. That is a huge amount of money in Rhode Island. It's in the top 5, and you guys are not one of the biggest school districts. So I think if they are out and I can work with RIDE, I'll try to figure out some way of saying, you know, based on previous evidence or what we've seen for other schools, when you build a new school, your matriculation rates increase or things like that. Please don't hold me to that. I'll do my best to get that information, but I mean, anecdotally, we know if you build it, they stay, or if you build it, they come, to use a Field of Dreams reference.
One last thing. There is public comment, just a note, on the agenda. So things like this may come up, to Kate's point. I think you're absolutely right. Like, we've already, this committee has done a significant amount of work, and we can't go backwards at this point. Like, the question's been asked. We took extreme measures to vet out other sites. We looked at that building. And to your point about swing space and other considerations beyond the dollars, right? We vetted that. This committee was charged to do that, and I feel that we've done that job and actually went above and beyond in many cases to appease certain community requests to look at things. At this point, what's in front of us, and the reason the agenda is restricted to this, is because that is the question in front of us. It's not, all right, let's go off on another path. Quite frankly, we don't have time for that, as you said, and I can tell you from a voting schedule, a legislative schedule, and I've iterated this to council, November, prior to Thanksgiving, is the time frame. We need a decision, whatever that may be.
And also, you will be receiving an email from Mario Carreño within the next week, where he will be providing a drop-dead date of when he needs that decision made by. It is not in December. It is coming up. So town council can push, but just be prepared that they will not be able to push that far. And with that having been said, you need to have something very concrete on the ballot about what they're voting for a new high school. You know, in other communities, you know, their bonds fail because people don't know what they're voting for. I think South Kingstown's done a great job of determining what the right project is and asking the voters to decide if it's in their best interest. It certainly doesn't make sense to ask for a blank check and then say, we're going to decide what's in your best interest. I think you guys are following the right approach by being very upfront, clear about what the project is and what it isn't.
Does anybody have any other questions or concerns about prepping for the meeting on the 24th?
Just one item that I know Phil had presented earlier on in the process, and I'd like to see again is the current facility, like a snapshot of we're open right now, our yearly cost is this, and a 10-year picture of keeping that building open with its deficiencies. Again, at a high level, with a building that size, with our current population, with the ancient HVAC, overspending on heating, electrical, everything, versus a modern build. Because I know as part of the town council, what they've been looking for is the operational savings. So just to show them, you know, with a new build, we could actually have a fully AC'd high school and be spending less money than we currently are with the behemoth building we have.
And let's not forget, you have an incredibly expensive facilities conditions assessment. Those projects will need to be done at some point if you do not build a new school, and you will not be getting above your base reimbursement rate if you decide to go through those projects. There will have to be a substantial investment in that high school at some point if you do not vote for a new school, and you will be sacrificing over 50% reimbursement rate to do those projects. Schools need to be warm, safe, and dry to be open. I've done the deepest of dive with your facilities conditions assessment, but there is millions and millions of dollars that will need to be completed within the next 5 years that will need to most likely be bonded for, and you will not be getting over 50% reimbursement like you'd be getting right now.
Okay, and the only other comment that I have about it is there is public comment that will be taking place on Tuesday, so people in the community are welcome to come. Please understand, and we're going to say it that night, we've said it before, I'll say it again. If the public comes to the microphone and asks questions of the school committee that is not on the agenda, the school committee, by Rhode Island general law, cannot answer the question if it's not on the agenda. The town council can adjust the agenda on the fly. School committees are not allowed to. It is Rhode Island general law. It is not our bylaws. It is Rhode Island general law. I can find the actual law code if people would like it. I'm happy to do that, but please understand that if questions that are not on the agenda come up, the school committee cannot address it. And if anybody has any other questions about any of that, we'll move on to our last topic, which is updates to the new website, skschoolproject.com.
So we pivoted. We had a much more robust website that was reviewed by this group. When we had that original meeting with town council where we discussed that we believed that the project needed to be increased funding to $150 million, we scaled it back. And I think our question for this group is, when would you like us to start adding back in some of that maybe renderings and designs and things like that? When would be an appropriate time? We have seen some traffic on the website. It's not substantial, but people are coming to the website. People are clicking on the FAQ tabs. We track that. We can see it. So I think our question to this group is when do we think a good target might be to add some more content back at it? And I ask because just for our own internal staffing, we want to make sure that we've got people in the right place so that they can get it out exactly when you need to do it.
I'm just going to state that we have an important meeting coming up, right? Brian's created what I look at as more of a background document. It's got all the data, right? The intent is we're going to not water it down, but make it more explainable to communities because they don't need to dig into every single, take it from a spreadsheet to round numbers on some slides, right? I think that might be something that could be added because I think in the last meeting there was some confusion coming out of that of what this means for the average homeowner, right? Is this, is this tax hit every year for the next 20 years? Is it for 5 years? Is it 1 year? We had a lot of questions. So I think trying to answer those in a very simple format through this slide deck may help that we can put up. I think then we can maybe eventually make it more robust. My opinion is let's take a slow approach because I think we're going to have an answer soon enough in November. And I think to the point that the building design even, like that sketch, may change a little bit. And then launch with clean information. If we get too far out with information, then we have to bring it back. It creates a little bit of confusion, my opinion only, but I feel like we don't want to give an unclear message. And I think the message we're giving is a great one, which is like we put the brakes on and we don't have any more information to give because we don't have clear information to give. And once we do have clear information to give, we'll give it. So my opinion only.
What I heard is they want to have an answer in October, not November.
My only concern / question would be, considering we're going to be discussing certain numbers and designs at the meeting on Tuesday, should those be available for the public to digest prior to the Tuesday meeting, even though I know it's a short little window? Or should we wait and have those presented in the meeting and then we can upload them afterwards depending on the outcome of the meeting? Strictly from being, again, this is what we're discussing, so we're talking about a schematic design that nobody else can see unless you're sitting at the table. So, I don't, the community's going to dissect everything we do no matter what and no matter what time we put it up. And so to me, it's let them,
Unfortunately, at this stage in the process, in my experience, people get hung up on details that are going to change. You might have some person who wants to vote against the project because this classroom is here and that classroom's there. This is the preliminary schematic design for this project. the design is going to change multiple times between now and the time that shovels are in the ground. So
So we should hold on putting it out into the World Wide Web. However, what I would love to see, make sure is that there are multiple copies of this in the room so people can look at it as we're talking about it. Yes, our picture's going to be taken of it. Yes, is it going to be shared? But it's not going to be an official document from,
yeah, Phil, put a giant
anybody.
draft watermark.
yeah.
Because it's important to
date
understand, Phil
on
has
it.
done a fantastic job
Correct.
for this community, but we have to follow an open procurement
Yeah.
process. So Phil may not be the architect in 2 months, and this design could completely pivot.
Correct.
Right? What I mean, there's certain things about this design that aren't going to change. Right? You've got a limited space to work with because of the land swap. You have a building that's going to be occupied. So certain things like maybe the typical shape and how many stories it is, those probably aren't going to change that much, but the interior footprint will definitely change
Yeah.
between now and the time that shovels are in the ground. I just, I find that some people, they get caught up on something
sure.
that's definitely going to change. We presented renderings the other day, and someone was like, "Oh, I hate red," and we're like, "That's just a color right now, so you can see the detailing, right? It's just to make it pop. It's not what the color of the building's going to be." So I think if we can preface, or if we before we show these, that these are very preliminary in order for us to get the most accurate costs possible. That's why we have created these. That's why RIDE requested these drawings, is to make sure that you have the program and that you can get an accurate cost for it.
But, to the point, we've already shown, right, schematic designs. It's on our website. We have an image of a building. And so I think this committee has said, we don't want to sell one thing and do a complete another. I don't think we're going to do that. I think we're going to right size and do maybe internal programming elements, what I hear. So I don't think there's a danger of showing this at the meeting. From the financial strategy, I'd prefer not to, because I want council to synthesize it first, and it requires explanation, and numbers without explanation can be dangerous. So I'd prefer that we bring it to the meeting, we do the meeting, and then we can put the numbers out there in an open format. It'll be public at that point. But I think, and we're still working on it right now. So until those numbers are hard and fast and we present them to council, that's the numbers we want to put out there.
I agree with that. But Phil, like I said, if we can have like preliminary draft with a date stamp on it, would be lovely. So that way we can counter any sort of nefarious use of it. Yeah.
If you guys need some easels, I can just bring them up so you don't have to drag them along.
All right. So we are at 5 on the button here. We have a gentleman here. Are you here for public comment or observation? Awesome. All right. Scheduling of the next meeting. Obviously, we have our joint meeting on Tuesday, October 24th at 6 o'clock. Town Council Chambers. Do we want to put something on the books? Following that, we don't know what's going to come out of the Tuesday meeting. We may get a decision, and we might have to move, or they may push off. But either way, I'm hearing that we need to boogie, and so I want to make sure we have something on the books. But I also would like to hear from Luke to see what are we expecting as far as decision, no decision, and timeline as far as what our drop dead is.
Where's my crystal ball? Right? I don't have any, contrary to pop-up opinion, I don't have any.
You don't?
Insider information on how this is going to go down. I know there's going to be some thoughtful discussion.
Yep.
My general sense is, I would say that it wouldn't be a surprise to me if they choose to wait to digest the information and also get some feedback from community, right? Because knowing town councils, the feedback matters, and you can't get it that night. That said, if everyone's on board and they decide to move forward, they will. It may not be a bad idea to put something soft on the schedule for the next week. We can always cancel it. But as a follow-up, if you think there's value into that, or Chris, to assess. I don't know what we can do at that point, except if something comes out of that meeting on Tuesday, like, we still need this, or we'd like the building committee to do that, that may be something we could address.
So, and then looking at kind of timing, we can either shoot for the next Thursday and put tentatively next Thursday and possibly, but then also a contingent of the 2nd, maybe? And
You
just know
thinking
that
4
they're,
o'clock again, or?
does 4 o'clock work for either the 26th and the 2nd, just having those kind of blocked? On the 26th? Okay. We can try another date that week, or we might just want to go with the 2nd, because what I don't want to do, quite frankly, you just go with the 2nd? Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hearing, and, yeah. Okay. My concern would just be the push from RIDE for us to have a decision. Okay, so we'll go with the 2nd.
If worst case, that the council is something, we feel like, or we need to reconvene, Kate can always say, listen, group, we need to get together earlier, and as long as we're 48 hours out, we can do that. Yep.
All right. So the 2nd it is, 4 o'clock. All right. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 5:03.
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 5:03.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, thank you.